the CEO and founder of Skylight Health Research. I am really, really excited to be chatting with Maria tonight about clinical research, women's health research, and a little bit into endometriosis research as well. Women's health research is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart for reasons that I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit later. Most importantly, though, I'm excited for Maria to share her story about how she's been impacted by women's health. And we can talk a little bit too about the different types of clinical research and what clinical research is happening within the field of women's health right now. My company, Skylight Health Research, has two different clinical site locations, one in Burlington, Massachusetts, and one in Colorado Springs, where we enroll patients into a variety of clinical research trials. And I'm really excited to dive a little bit more into what that looks like as a participant and the different options that are out there. But before I take over and talk for the next 20 minutes, just monologuing, I'd love to pass it over to Maria to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Morales, and I'm a community health worker with Tea Leaf Health. And as Alicia alluded to, this topic is very, very near and dear to my heart as an endo warrior, endo survivor. And I use the term survivor because I almost died literally from this disease. And so, I mean, Alicia, I can just go ahead and just kind of share a little bit right now if you're okay with that.
Please go ahead.
Awesome, awesome. So back in 2006, I was scheduled to have laparoscopy done, basically to see if I had endometriosis, because as of right now, that is pretty much the only way to diagnose it. And so this was after years of suffering and pain. And when I finally, the date came and it was time for me to have this in and out procedure done, my uterus was in such bad shape from the endometriosis that they had to do an emergency hysterectomy. I almost bled to death and had to have multiple blood transfusions. And the amount of trauma mentally that I suffered from that and physically that I still suffer to this day, there are just not enough words to describe. And if anyone that is on the call has experienced the diagnostic process for endometriosis as it is today. Hopefully, your story is not as horrific as mine. But again, anything where you have anything that is evasive that has to be done for you to find out if you're okay, or in a lot of instances, validate what you kind of already know. Because Alicia, I think that that's also a component here that a lot of times we as women, we know our bodies, we know when something's not right. But yet with endometriosis, we have to go through this process to have that validated. And so, like Alisha, not just endometriosis and anything related to advancing the care and diagnosis of endometriosis is important to me, but really clinical research for women, and especially as a woman of color, is just a topic that we cannot talk enough about. And so, thank you guys so much for joining us. And I'm hoping that, at the end of this, everyone is leaving with some really great information.
Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing some of your story. I honestly, personally, I have something similar. I had undiagnosed HELP syndrome and I was going to say endometriosis. It was not that. I had undiagnosed HELP syndrome and preeclampsia and almost lost my life during childbirth. I'm very, very aware of the research that came before me and the participants who participated in the clinical research trials for the drug that saved my life when I was giving birth to my first child. And it's something that I really hold near and dear in my heart, not even for the trauma of it, but for understanding that clinical research makes such a difference. And I'm just going to jump right in and discuss a little bit about what clinical research is and why it's so important. And because we're on the topic of women's health, in 1977, just to start with a little quick fact, the FDA actually recommended excluding women of childbearing age from clinical research trials in its entirety. So excluded just a phenomenal number of individuals from research that was very, very important to them. This decision was not reversed until 1993. So there's just a phenomenal amount of time there that women were excluded from research. And as much as that may not seem like a really big deal, we know how different women's bodies are from male bodies. And it's really exciting as a clinical researcher to start seeing the difference in what's coming up and what's being studied. And as a business owner, as a women-owned, women-led business, it is so vastly important to me to be able to contribute to women's health research on whatever scale that is. But for us at Skylight, we run a number of different research studies, and some of these are going to be what seem more traditional. They're going to be the vaccine trials for new
That's
vaccines that
exactly what I was
happen.
going to ask you,
Yeah.
Alisha. Like, can we talk about this a little bit? Because I know that, like, for so many of us, when we think clinical research, that's what we think, right? Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
they're going to give me like some weird radioactive drug that nobody's ever used before, and I'm going to break out with whatever. Like, we think of those images and things that we see in movies because in this country especially we don't talk about clinical research enough for people to really have an educated opinion about it. So, like, I'm so excited that you're doing this, because please help us understand what actually the research is.
I mean, it varies so drastically. We absolutely participate and enroll patients into things like vaccine trials and traditional drug trials, where you're coming in, you're not knowing if you're getting placebo, something like saline, or if you're getting an investigational medicine. You will have all of the information about this clinical trial. And at Skylight, we're predominantly participating in trials called phase 2 and phase 3, which means they are not the first in human trials. By the time they're coming to us, they have been tested in animal models, they've been tested in humans, and to a certain extent, they have been deemed safe. Clinical research as a whole, there's always going to be a risk to it, but for our participants coming in, it's entirely voluntary and informed, which is very, very important. You're going to have probably a 30-page document that runs over that research, and you're going to have one of my sub-investigators, one of my nurses, or one of my research coordinators going through all of the risks, all of the potential benefits, and all of the information you need to know about that clinical research trial. And again, it may be a vaccine or it may be a new drug to treat something like osteoarthritis. And for individuals who are suffering from knee pain, from osteoarthritis, having the option to access a new therapy is really exciting because there's not great treatments out there. And I get really excited personally when we get to participate in research where there isn't a great option for treatment, and we can find better solutions for patients, especially when you're looking at chronic pain, and to deviate away from things like opioids and find new
Right.
solutions that are going to help patients better manage their conditions and live a higher quality of life. Outside of that, though, we do a lot of just sample collection studies as well. And this may be anything from blood to saliva to urine to nasal swabs if it's for a new device or assay. And these are done for really early phase research in order to develop new blood tests and do really early phase research on different conditions or on healthy population subjects. And I shouldn't even say subjects, I hate that word. It's still used. I like the word participant as opposed to subject, but it slips out sometimes because it's still used a bit in the industry. This clinical research is really important as well. So this is non-interventional research. So participants can still give their time and volunteer and come in and give a blood sample, and that blood sample may be used for the development of a new assay that's going to detect something like cancer or detect something like endometriosis. And being able to detect diseases at earlier stages through less invasive procedures is phenomenal advancement in medicine, and something that is an option as well. It's not always going to be, I'm getting something investigational. It could just be, I'm offering my time, I'm offering different specimens to be able to do that early phase research. So there really is a wide variety of what you can participate in. And maybe that first one that you want to do is just a sample collection study, and you can come in and meet the team and learn what it's about and really understand that level of comfort with coming into a medical clinic and doing something a little bit different. Patients are coming in, you're still going to be getting different care. We're going to be taking vital signs, doing physical exams, and doing lab work that, especially for a longitudinal investigational study, you maybe wouldn't be doing otherwise with your primary care provider. And we've caught things for some of our patients that we've sent them back and said, you need to look in this and this with your primary care provider to find out more about this, about what's going on. You have an abnormal lab result. And we've had patients who we've caught things early just because they're going through this flow of a clinical research trial. So it is really incredible what can happen. But one thing that is so important to me for all of our patients who come in is have them really, really understand what they're doing, that they're not just another data point, they're not just another
I
specimen,
was
they're
going
not
to
just
ask you about that. And I'm so sorry to cut you off, but I was going to, like, as you were talking, I'm like, all of this sounds amazing. But I know that for many people in my community, for example, like the fear of the unknown can definitely prevent them from really exploring, participating in clinical research. And so my question to you is like, when your company works with people, to get them enrolled in different types of studies, is there anything that they are, or is there anything that you're not required to tell them about the study? Because like I know I'm pretty sure you know where I'm going with this, but like, as a person of color, we think of like the Tuskegee experiment and some of the experiments that happened, in Puerto Rico, where my family is from, around sterilization and things of that sort. And in all of these instances, patients went in thinking they were getting treatment or studying X, and then very much it was Y and it was something different. So, are there guardrails or anything that exists today to keep things like that from happening?
absolutely. And that is a dark, dark period of time and one that we will frequently recognize. I've had patients talk to me about Tuskegee and what happened with it, which we don't have time to get into that tonight. It was a horrific period of time. And when I was doing my undergrad and when I was doing my master's of health research methodology, this is something that you study. You study and you learn what happened because you
Wow.
need to understand what cannot be repeated. But there's so much in place now from the International Council for Harmonization and even just the ethics boards, the amount of work that goes into getting a protocol approved and everything that goes through that. We don't do anything without ethics approval and proper informed consent from our patients. So that informed consent form is going to give all of the information. And if throughout the course of a trial new information is learned, we are going to reconsent our participants with a new consent form to say, this is the new information that's been learned throughout the course of this trial. We want you to understand if the risks have changed, if the benefits have changed. And the IRB, the International or Institutional Review Board, sorry, so many acronyms in clinical research, they are going to review that consistently. The review board is going to be reviewing any new serious adverse events that are coming up if they're relevant and caused potentially by the investigational medicine or as a direct result of the trial. So patients stay heavily, heavily informed as to what is going on if there are changes throughout the course of the trial. But no, we've learned from the mistakes of the past. And it's something that we are so heavily regulated by the FDA, by IRBs, from REBs, ICH, like the International Council for Harmonization, and we operate everything under good clinical protection training or good clinical practice training and human subjects protection training. So there is a lot of training
Oh,
that
wow.
all research staff undergo to make sure that we ensure the safety of our participants. And I know that my staff on the ground, and this would be for all staff at all research sites, not exclusive to ours. There are phenomenal research sites out there, even if you're not close to one of mine. All staff are going to have this training if they're participating or enrolling or interacting with patients on clinical research trials to make sure that patient safety is always, always, always the number one priority.
Now, let me ask you something, because you said something interesting to me in that, even when the information changes during that study, whatever the study is, that information is always shared with the patient. What happens if, hypothetically, the patient gets the information and for whatever reason they decide that they really don't want to participate in the study anymore? Like, can they back out? Is it a situation where, like, once they sign up, they have to see it through? How does that work?
I smile and I laugh because that just seems so preposterous to me that a patient could come to me and say, I don't want to participate, and I could try and stop them. Patients always have the right to withdraw their consent at any point in time. If it becomes unsafe for them to be taking the study drug, if it's something that's ongoing, sometimes the investigator will decide, no, it's not safe for you. We would love at that point to monitor them for safety. A lot of the time, if a patient wants to withdraw their consent, again, we're going to have that conversation with them. We're going to understand why. If it's a patient, they can't handle the burden of coming in for the trial visits anymore, that's something that we're going to completely understand. If they're feeling potentially a little bit unsafe because of new information, or they're feeling wary about that, especially if they're no longer receiving that potential intervention, we would encourage the patient to stay on just so we could monitor them for safety, because so often safety labs are collected from the participants through the end of the trial. But again, if a participant no longer wants to participate in a trial, we're never going to stop them from withdrawing their consent. And granted, we don't get a lot of participants withdrawing their consent, again, because we work really hard to empower our patients for them to really understand what they're doing and what they're contributing. It's a lot to participate in a clinical research trial, and they can make such a difference. It's just like voting when you feel like, oh, what's my single vote going to do? Patients aren't just another data point. They're not just another specimen. They're not just another needle in an arm, or just one person in a massive sample set. Their inclusion matters, and a representative and diverse inclusion in trials is so, so important as well. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I rambled on a
No, no,
little
no,
bit,
no,
but
no.
no, patience.
No, because it absolutely answered my question, right? Because like that is part of the issue. We, at least in my opinion and in my experience, you know, we're not really educated or taught about clinical research or why it's important. You know, we have media that kind of, I don't want to say mocks it, but in a lot of ways mocks clinical research because, you
Mhm.
know, it'll get you a laugh or a scare or whatever it may be in said media form. So I think it is like important to get all of this information because where else are we getting it from? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's challenging for me because I'm so immersed in the field of clinical research. I know it so intimately. I've been in clinical research my entire career, and to help correct the misunderstandings around it, and even just a question, all it takes is a question is, are you on hypertension medication, or do you have something to manage your diabetes? Somebody participated in a clinical research trial to get that drug to market and to make sure it was safe for you. And that'll always give somebody pause when they're taking a medication. And again, my life has been saved by medications and by patients who came before me who participated in clinical research trials. And I think when you put it in that perspective, it's like somebody participated in the studying of that drug that you're taking that's maintaining your health. And it may seem like something that's not a big deal. Somebody else did it, but it can be incredibly empowering for patients to say, well, no, I can contribute to this. And then they also have that, depending on the trial, a 50-50 chance of potentially getting something that's going to have a great impact on their life
That's what I was
if
going
the
to ask
drug
you.
works properly. And I mean, at the alternative, maybe it doesn't work, and then we're preventing something unsafe or ineffective from hitting the market.
Yeah. No, it's so funny because I was gonna mention that like you know for some depending on the study depending on their condition or whatever you know it can be life changing if it works for them during that trial but help me because I want to I heard once that it's just as important to have healthy people participate in clinical research as people who may have a condition that is being explored you know whether it's diagnostic you know treatment what have you is that true like should folks who may not have a specific condition still be thinking about clinical research and still possibly be looking to participate in some research.
Absolutely. And it completely depends on the trial and what it's looking at. If you're looking at an osteoarthritis medication, you're going to need somebody who has osteoarthritis to test that medication.
Right.
But when you're looking at a new vaccine, for the most part, you're going to want healthier patients in that trial. So you're not putting anybody who's immunocompromised or who has a condition that's not managed properly in that trial to put them at further risk. So absolutely, there's always options for both individuals with particular therapy or particular indications, as well as healthy volunteers, just depending on the type of trial. And even we have ongoing sample collection studies that are just for healthy volunteers that are needed for a variety of different reasons, that we almost always have a trial like that going on or a study like that going on. And those are often just cross-sectional. You're coming in, it's just a simple sample collection. You're still going through the full informed consent process. We're collecting the data, we're collecting the specimens, and your participation ends there with a prepaid debit card walking out of our clinic to compensate you for your time.
So let me ask you something about that. I'm so glad that you mentioned the prepaid debit card because I feel like, I have talked to people who, when I've mentioned that, some studies, will have some type of compensation for your time, it's a red flag, right? It's like, oh, you're just trying to pay me for my silence because you might make me sick or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about why research clinical research studies a lot of times will provide some form of compensation to participants? Because I have to believe, especially considering that it's usually not a lot of money, that this is not hush money. We're not, no one's trying to keep people quiet.
It depends on the trial, but again, patients, they're giving their time and they're coming in. And even if you're coming in for a 30-minute visit, you're driving to the clinic, you're taking time out of your schedule. Because again, we're open normal working hours. We do flex our hours a little bit to accommodate patients when it's necessary and when they need that accommodation. But you're still coming in and you're giving your time. And it's very important to me to reimburse patients for that time. I have never actually launched a trial at our clinic that does not compensate patients for their time. We've had some trials that patients are in for an 8-hour day of doing blood draws for 8 hours for, it's called the PK day. And again, they're going to be taking a day off work and that deserves compensation. It's not hush money, it's their time. And it's understanding that they're volunteering their time and they're going through the effort. Sometimes they're completing diaries electronically on a daily or a weekly basis. And again, we recognize that this takes effort and this takes time and this takes dedication from patients. It's absolutely not hush money at all, because again, it's going to be very clearly stated in that informed consent form what will happen if they are harmed as part of the clinical research trial, and that's going to be outlined for them.
Do they
They're
get that information up front?
absolutely,
Oh,
yes,
wow.
they will know upfront if they are harmed as part of the trial, exactly what that's going to look like. It's going to be outlined in the informed consent form. And again, they have ongoing consent. So if something changes, they're reconsenting. But that compensation and that money is for their time. And again, we will, as much as we can, we'll bring patients in and we'll facilitate rides with Uber or Lyft to make sure that research is accessible for them, because there are patients, they want to participate. I've had patients say, I don't want the money, I just want to help, which is
Right.
amazing. But again, it is important to me, depending on what's involved in that trial. Sometimes, again, if it's a vaccine trial, you're stuck sitting in the clinic for an hour or two so that we can monitor you after that dose to make sure that you are safe before we let you leave the clinic. So again, it's that time
Well, it's
and
so
making
funny that
sure
you
that that's
mentioned time,
compensated.
right? It's so funny that you mentioned time because we don't have a ton of it.
We do
So
not.
I do want to kind of circle back because we started the conversation talking about endometriosis, and I kind of want to go back to that, right? Because I know that you have this study that's going on in two separate locations. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this specific study? And I know that you may not be able to discuss everything about it, but can you just explain a little bit more what it is that this particular study is aiming to do and kind of just like how it works?
Absolutely. And thank you, Kevin, for putting our slide up again, because when we talk about ethics boards and making sure that we are doing everything above board, this particular flyer that you're seeing here, this has been reviewed by a research ethics board, and we're not able to distribute content that's patient facing that hasn't been reviewed by a research ethics board, to make sure that we're not luring patients in under false pretenses for what this is doing. But we do have a really incredible study that's ongoing that we're actively enrolling for. And this study is looking to find a better way to diagnose endometriosis by hopefully one day not necessarily needing that laparoscopic surgery to diagnose something that 10% of women suffer from, which just
Is
it seems
that
outrageous
high?
that here we are. But again, it's so exciting that this is starting. This is a non-interventional study, so it's not going to have, there's no drug, there's no medication, it's just a simple blood draw, and we're looking for very specific women to participate in this study. As it mentions on here, again, this is going to give you all the information. There's a lot more information on our website about this particular study again, but for something like this, it's science that I believe in because I so badly, in my core, want to help advance women's health research now that we're starting to see these advancements in the field. And again, some of them are going to be treatment trials, but some of them are just going to be these sample collection studies where that early phase research is being done. And it's important to collect a variety of different samples to make sure that that research can progress, because without the samples to test the test is essentially what we're doing, it's not going to progress much farther. And it takes all kinds of people to get this kind of important research done. It's important to help challenge what is distributed in the media and how we approach clinical research and what it seems like. I know whenever I hear anybody refer to research participants as guinea pigs or say, I'm not a guinea pig, I don't want this. It causes me physical pain because we have so many incredible patients who give their time, give their specimens, go through effort to help us advance evidence-based medicine. And we're not going to advance medicine without clinical research. So it's just so important to consider participating if it's something that is an option for you, or if you hear of a study, again, not necessarily even at one of our sites, but if you hear of a study, so many lives have been changed by participating in clinical research studies, whether it's because we caught a safety lab near the end of the study and we were able to refer you to a primary care provider, or because that new medication did actually work. But just even going in and participating and giving that blood sample, depending on what the study is, it can feel so empowering to say, yes, I helped contribute to science, and I know that I'm personally being represented in this study by my sample and who I am. So it takes truly all kinds of individuals, and I'm very honored to have the opportunity to do what I do in advanced medicine, knowing that we're doing it safely and knowing that we're doing it in a way that empowers patients.
Yeah, no, I commend you, and I know we've talked before, and I've shared this before, but like what you're doing is so amazing simply because we've been so underrepresented just to begin with in this space. Now, if I, let's say I or anyone else on the call are like, I think it's time, I think I need to, look and see how I might be able to help. How does someone go about that? How does just a random person say, I think I want to help out with some clinical research? What would be your advice to them to get started?
Google and clinical trials near me. If the research sites have their SEO working, it's hopefully going to pop up. But truly, I mean, I think this is going to take you to our website where you can learn more about Skylight Health Research and what we do. You'll see a variety of what we're currently enrolling patients for, and also just a database, an option to say, hey, I want to join the network, so that you would potentially get an email when we have a new study, because the first thing we're always going to do is send an email to everybody in our database within the age range of that study to say, hey, this is what's going on. And then sometimes we'll blast it out to everybody just in case they know somebody who may be eligible for that study. But that's the option for us. But truly, I would just Google what's going on in your area, or if you have a specific disease indication, such as diabetes, say diabetes research near me, or diabetes research, Burlington, Massachusetts, and hopefully something will come up. I mean, I've had family members reach out saying, hey, have you heard of a study in this area for this particular indication? And I will go and I'll search around and see if I can find anything. The other option as well, there's a website called clinicaltrials.gov. It's a rather archaic website. It's not great, but it does have, if you search an indication and you search your location, it will show you trials that are currently enrolling and some that are maybe just upcoming if that's something else. I mean, I could go on for a while. There are other options that you can just join. There's a site called Power, and patients can just join and sign up. But I am getting the notification that we are getting very close to time here. Maria, we knew this was going to be an option that we'd be
No,
able to
it's
just
fine. It's
continue
fine. And
talking and
listen,
talking.
I'm I'm asking a bunch of questions because, I'm still learning, even in my role, more and more about clinical research and kind of unlearning what I've known of clinical research up until, recently. So I think that this is great. And I know I'm throwing out questions, but at this time, for our attendees in the audience, we really wanted to make sure that we carved up plenty of time for questions. So if anyone has any questions, if you can pop them into the Q&A chat, which should be located towards the bottom of your screen, we would be happy to get your questions, and 9 times out of 10 for Alisha to answer your questions, because clearly she probably has forgotten more about clinical trials than I actually know. So please, if you have some questions, drop them in there and we are happy to answer them for you. And Alisha, really quickly, while we're waiting for any questions to pop up, let me ask you, with this particular trial, from participation to potentially distribution of an actual test, nationwide or what have you, what do the timeframes on that normally tend to look like from study to FDA approval?
Oh, this is hard because I'm going to answer it how I answer every other question as it pertains to clinical research. It depends. It completely depends. I do know that this particular company developing this assay, they are close to having a product on market. It won't be covered by insurance yet, but it's still going through the rigorous testing through clinical research. But it is, I think, going to be available soon. But it really, for a standard trial, it really, really depends. A lot of the trials that we work on are phase 2, which means they still need to go through a full phase 3 trial before they're going to hit the market. And this takes years. New drugs are studied so much before they hit the market. Although we did actually participate in an antibody trial last year. It was 2023 to 2024. And while this trial was ongoing, it received emergency authorization use because early data were showing that it had a tremendous impact. And that was, I get so excited talking about this trial because it suddenly offered protection against COVID-19 to immunocompromised individuals. I
Oh,
can't.
wow.
I just saw a question coming in, but that was so exciting that I know we were participating, we were still following patients, but the early data were really, really powerful. And the FDA said, yes, no, this can hit the market because it has such an impact. So that's really exciting when that happens. That's the only time that's happened since I have been doing this. But I did just see that we had a question coming in that says, if I can't participate in this one, can I try and do another one later? Absolutely. So one of the things for anybody who signs up for one of our trials, we're always going to do outreach. We are going to go ahead and do pre-screening. And for individuals who aren't eligible for that study, we will always either one, let them know about what else we have going on in case, hey, there's another one and you're actually eligible for this one if you're interested in doing it. And then we would flip you over and tell you all the information about that study. But just because you're not eligible, or even just because if you don't want to participate in another one, you're not going to end up blacklisted from our site if you say, no, I'm not comfortable with this one, but maybe I'd be interested in one in the future. There's always that opportunity. And I always hope that any interaction with my staff, my coordinators, my nurses is just going to make you feel more comfortable with the idea of participating again in the future.
Awesome. And while we wait for any other questions to come in, I want to ask you about that because, if I am a good example, right? Like I could not do the endometriosis study at this point, but maybe there's something else that a middle-aged woman can do. Do you find that a lot of your patients end up, or not even a lot, but a significant number of your patients, like because of the experience that they've had, try to then do additional studies?
Yes. Yes, we do have a lot of participants who will come back. We will have participants who will call us and say, "Hey, do you have anything new?" And we'll always tell them, "You're going to get an email if we have something new, or just check on the website as well." But we always get excited when we have patients coming back. And again, they may just participate in sample collection studies, or they may graduate and decide that they're going to participate in a vaccine trial next because they're starting to get more comfortable with our team and with that process. But absolutely, we do have patients who will come back and participate in multiple studies. They cannot participate in the same study more than once because that would be fraud. But we do make sure that we offer other opportunities for them whenever we can, because again, patients, once they start doing it and they like coming in and participating and they see what that process is like, they do often like coming in again if we have other opportunities that they're going to be eligible for.
And I or my anyone that wants to participate, they can work with more than just one company, right? So, like for example, I could do a study with Skylight Health Research, and then maybe there's another company that is doing a study that I also want to participate in. Is there ever an issue with doing that, or can people do that if they
That is
choose?
a great question. And yes, there is an issue with that. Not necessarily because of conflicts with the companies, but potentially with conflicts with the trials. If you're on one drug trial for an investigational product, a lot of the time you cannot go and participate in another one because you don't want to counteract what those are potentially doing or provide reactions that aren't going to be anticipated. And this is something, there are actually different systems in place for clinical research sites to check if a patient is in multiple studies at once or trying to participate in the same study at multiple clinics. So there are safeguards in place for the most part, but again, we do rely on participants being honest with us. And if we ask, have you had an investigational product or are you participating in another trial? We are going to be asking that and making sure, because we would never want to put a participant at risk because of another study's participation. And we wouldn't want to, even if it's not our study, we don't want to disrupt that study if it's not well,
Right.
just generally, we don't want to disrupt the science and the medicine just for our own being able to enroll that participant. It's different if it's a sample collection study, and let's say it allows for if they are on another study for an investigational medicine and they're just doing a blood draw study with us. That is sometimes allowed, but again, we have to really understand what that other study is, and hopefully that patient has kept a copy of their informed consent form where it's going to tell them you cannot participate in another study at the same time.
All right, so we do have another question. It's coming in, but how much time or how many days do I need to be able to commit to participate in this study? So specifically the endometriosis study, but if you can answer for like this study and generally speaking, that would be great.
Absolutely. So the endometriosis study that we have ongoing is an hour coming into the clinic. Again, it's cross-sectional. So once we confirm eligibility, patients are coming in, we're going to go through informed consent, we're going to collect data, we're going to collect a blood specimen. You're going to be leaving our clinic. There will be one more step after that because we would need the results of the laparoscopic surgery to confirm whether or not endometriosis was diagnosed or not at that point. But this one is a very quick study from the participant's perspective. But again, we have other studies that patients are coming in every other month for 2 years. And there's a lot more to that, and there's phone calls in between. But again, it depends so heavily on the study. We have some that patients are followed for 12 weeks. We have another one that could potentially be upcoming that participants are followed for 4 years.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it drastically changes. But again, going back to informed consent, you're going to know what is required of you at the start of that study. And we're going to make sure that you feel comfortable with completing that study before we bring you onto it. If you're hesitating and saying, I don't know if I could make that work, again, we don't want to enroll participants who are going to drop off because it's so integral to the science and the validity of the results to follow patients to the end of the study. If we were just enrolling patients and saying, just enroll now, it doesn't matter if you come back, it's going to be detrimental to the science. And that is another thing that we just absolutely want to avoid. We want to make sure that patients are committed to doing the trial with us and make sure that they do understand what's going to be involved there.
And on that, regardless of who the researcher is, right? Like these standards that we've been talking about over the last half hour, like these are universal standards, correct? This is not just
Absolutely.
you guys do it this way and other people do whatever they want.
No, I know other phenomenal clinical research sites. It's a large industry, but it's also a very small industry. And everybody is upheld to these standards and these guidelines, these compliance and regulatory guidelines that are given to make sure, again, at the forefront is ensuring that we are promoting patient safety in everything that we do. So it is not just us. We do a very great job of it, but other research sites are going to be just as wonderful and make sure that patients are safe there as well.
All right. And then the last question that I want to ask, unless one of our attendees has a question that they want to throw in before we wrap tonight, the the process, not just the process to participate, but then like the process of those results then turning into actual tangible solutions for people, right? That it's going to be the same regardless of whatever is going on in the political climate or anything else, correct? Like this is one of those things where as long as the FDA is the FDA, this is the process. Is my understanding there correct?
I hope so.
Okay,
I
okay.
hope so. I'm just gonna end it there. I hope so. I hope that the process is not altered unless it's being altered in a way that is going to further promote, again, patient safety and ensuring that the drugs are hitting the market are effective and safe.
And tests also happen just because I want to be clear. We have tests on diagnostic tools, we have tests on medications. Do we also test for like new medical devices and things like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, just all kinds of things. Even when you think about when we were all swabbing our noses during the pandemic, those devices had to be tested to make sure that they were effective and that they were accurately detecting COVID and you weren't getting false positives or false negatives. So everything like that is tested as well. It's a massive industry and a lot needs to happen. We need a lot of participants. We need a lot of clinical research sites and we need a lot of collaboration to really to do what we can to advance medicine.
Amazing. Well, it doesn't look like our audience has any other questions. Alisha, thank you so much for taking this time out to sit and have this conversation. I know that even with the knowledge that I have learned so much from this conversation, and I'm really hopeful that our attendees have as well. Are there any last words that you'd like to leave everybody with before we end the session this evening?
Other than just thanking everybody who has hopped on, let me chat about the industry that I love so much. It is truly an honor to do what I can do. I get excited every day when I get to wake up and I get to work towards advancing medicine. I know that my staff feels the same, and my email is right there. I am the owner of the company, and as much as I employ people who are much smarter than me, I am always happy to continue the conversation about clinical research and answer any questions that anybody may have. It would not be the first time that I've gotten on the phone with potential participants when we've been busy and I'm helping the staff screen. And I mean, it's an industry that I love so dearly, and I can talk about it truly forever to anybody. So feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, if something comes up after the fact. And even if it's not something necessarily that I'm the best person to answer, I have a phenomenal team and I can pass you along as well.
Amazing. And also, everyone, my email address is here as well. If you have any questions, not just about what we've discussed this evening, but other questions around clinical studies and clinical trials and why they're important, reach out to me. I am here to answer any question that I can. Like Alisha, if I don't know the answer, I get to work with amazing people like Alisha and other members of our actual internal Tea Leaf Health team that are phenomenal and will help us get those answers. So please do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Maria.
No, thank you. And everyone, thank you so much for attending. This is the end of the webinar. We're going to leave the screen up for a moment just in case anyone needs to capture the information on the screen. We want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we're hoping to make a series of these types of conversations